The doorbell camera does not lie. 1:47 a.m., January 31st. A masked figure steps onto the porch of a home in the Catalina Foothills carrying a 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack. The timestamp burns cold and permanent into the digital record. For 95 days, that image has been everywhere. On every network, every news ticker, every true crime feed. The world has been hunting that figure with everything it has. The FBI stopped hunting him weeks ago. Dr. Ann Burgess has spent decades shaping the behavioral science behind America's most complex federal investigations. When she assessed this case, her conclusion did not waver. Porch Guy is not hiding. He is not across any border. He is not waiting to be found. The man on that porch was a waiter, sent to deliver an order designed by someone else entirely. And in the cold arithmetic of the man who sent him, a living witness is a liability. A silent one is not. The puppet master did not just plan the abduction of Nancy Guthrie. He planned what came after it. And what came after it is silence. If you are just finding this case, subscribe to Justice Over Everything right now and turn on notifications. Share this video and keep Nancy's name alive. Because the puppet master is still out there, and the more eyes on this story, the harder it becomes for him to disappear. Uncover the truth. Demand justice. March 2025. 10 months before that porch light ever flickered, before the backpack, before the timestamp, before any of it, something quiet and deliberate was already in motion. An IP address later flagged by federal investigators began running targeted searches on the Guthrie property. Not casual browsing. Not a curious neighbor pulling up a real estate listing. Overhead satellite imagery, property boundary lines, structural layouts. The kind of search pattern that has a name in federal intelligence circles. A target package. The kind of map you build when you are not planning a crime of passion. When you are planning an extraction. A second round of digital surveillance followed in November 2025, this time narrowing further to Nancy's specific medical vulnerabilities, to the neighborhood's technical infrastructure, to the invisible seams in a community that had no reason to feel anything but safe. She was 84 years old. She had lived in those foothills long enough to trust them completely. He had been studying her world for the better part of a year, not learning the house, learning every weakness around it, every blind spot, every moment the neighborhood's eyes drifted closed and stayed there. Tucson made a choice, a beautiful one, to protect the clarity of its desert sky. The dark sky ordinance that governs this city legally minimizes street lighting across residential areas so that the stars above the Sonoran Desert remain visible, unspoiled, exactly as they were meant to be seen. It is the kind of civic decision that speaks to a community's values, a city that chose wonder over convenience. He studied that choice like a blueprint. The Catalina Foothills, where Nancy had built her life, where she knew every curve of every road, sit in a state of near total nocturnal darkness by design. Not by neglect, by law. And the puppet master mapped every shadow of it. January 11th, 3 weeks before the abduction, footage from a neighboring residence captured a figure moving through the desert brush with an ease that does not come from a single visit. That is the movement of a man who has been there before. Multiple nights, multiple dry runs, learning the rhythm of a neighborhood the way only someone with a purpose learns anything. The darkness Tucson chose to protect its sky. He turned into a corridor, and Nancy had no idea anyone was walking through it. Before anyone reached that door, the house was already gone. Not broken into, not forced, gone. The way a city block goes dark when a transformer fails, sudden and total, and without warning. The internet outages neighbors reported on the night of January 31st were initially dismissed as routine service interruptions, the kind of thing you reset your router for in the morning and forget by noon. They were not that. Forensic analysts are currently examining the high probability that a signal jammer, a handheld device engineered to emit radio frequency interference, was deployed in the Catalina Foothills that night to sever the connection between Nancy's Nest cameras and her home Wi-Fi mesh. In a single calculated move, every digital eye inside that house went dark. Every recording device, every notification, every alert that should have fired the moment that Porch was approached, silenced before it could speak. And then the question that fractures everything. How does any offender know the specific mesh network vulnerabilities of an 84-year-old woman's home? How does a stranger walk onto a porch with a jammer calibrated to that exact system? He was never a stranger. That is what the technology is telling the FBI. Not that he came prepared, that he already knew. The first 72 hours after an abduction are irreplaceable. Not important, not significant, irreplaceable. The way a window is irreplaceable once it closes. Every minute that passes without federal intervention is a minute where digital breadcrumbs dissolve, biological traces degrade, and a sophisticated offender finalizes the moves he planned for exactly this moment. In the Nancy Guthrie case, those hours were not lost. They were surrendered. A catastrophic conflict between the Pima County Sheriff's Office and the FBI kept federal experts sidelined for 96 hours. The supervisor assigned to oversee the scene had never investigated a homicide, not once, and so the investigation was shaped by the only framework that supervisor knew: search and rescue. Deputies fanned out across the foothills looking for an elderly woman who had wandered into the desert brush, while the blood on the doorstep, the propped rear door, the staged entry markers of a professional extraction were processed with what experts would later call amateur-hour precision. The DNA samples were not rushed to Quantico. They were routed to a private lab in Florida. Cell tower data that could have identified every active burner phone in those foothills at 1:47 a.m., went unsubpoenaed for 4 days. 4 days. The puppet master had not just planned for the crime. He had planned for exactly this gap. And when it opened, he was already through it. To catch him, you have to understand him. Dr. Gary Brucato has spent his career studying what he calls clinical evil. Not the impulsive, desperate violence that fills police blotters, but the cold, architectural kind. The kind that is designed in advance, executed by proxy, and observed from a safe distance. When he looks at the Nancy Guthrie abduction, he sees a hierarchy with a precise name: the chef and the waiter. Porch Guy was the waiter. He took the order, carried it to the door, and stood under the porch light while the camera recorded every second of his face. He was essential for the moment of service. He was always expendable after it. The puppet master is the chef. He never left the kitchen. He designed the menu, sourced the intelligence, mapped the darkness, calibrated the jammer, and watched from a distance while his waiter did the work that would appear on every front page in America. But here is what behavioral science tells us about a man like this. He did not choose this crime for the money. The ransom notes sent to TMZ and local Tucson stations were not the frantic demands of a street-level opportunist. They were precise, religiously framed, crafted with the deliberate care of a man who needed an audience. By targeting the mother of a national NBC anchor, the puppet master was not building a payday. He was building a legacy. A God complex does not just demand control. It demands to be witnessed. And a man who needs to be witnessed always leaves something behind. He removed the witness. He could not remove what the witness left behind. 2 threads are now inside the federal net, and neither one requires a human voice to speak. Neither one can be intimidated. Neither one can be eliminated. They exist in realms the puppet master's God complex never fully accounted for. The permanent mathematical record of the blockchain and the microscopic biological world of a single strand of hair. The first ghost is digital. On February 10th, 2026, a specific Bitcoin wallet connected to the ransom demands received a deposit, not the millions requested, a granular, traceable sum. Blockchain forensics is not a theory. It is a permanent, unalterable public ledger that forgets nothing and forgives nothing. Federal financial crime units are currently running chain analysis through a series of intermediary mixing wallets, a digital shell game designed to bury the source. But every exit point from the blockchain eventually touches a traditional exchange where identity verification protocols are not optional. The boss handed the FBI a thread that cannot be burned. The second ghost is biological. Inside the Guthrie residence, investigators recovered a single rootless hair. No nuclear DNA, no standard database match. But Quantico is now rebuilding a suspect profile through probabilistic genotyping, tracing mitochondrial DNA fragments backward through genetic genealogy, mapping second and third cousins, narrowing toward a specific family branch in Tucson. DNA does not choose to fall. Bitcoin does not choose to be recorded. The puppet master believed he cleared the board. He only cleared the voice. The board remembers everything. Subscribe to Justice Over Everything and share this video right now. Nancy Guthrie's family deserves every set of eyes on this case. The puppet master is still out there. And the more people watching, the harder it becomes for him to stay hidden. Like this video and stay with us. Uncover the truth. Demand justice. The Sonoran Desert does not give up its secrets easily. 95 days of silence, 95 days of searches, cadaver dogs, aerial sweeps, and the kind of waiting that does not have a name because no word was ever built to hold it. The Catalina Foothills that Nancy knew by heart, every curve of every road, every shadow of every ridge, have offered nothing back. Then, May 8th, 2026. 7 miles from the Guthrie property, a local true crime streamer moving through the desert brush with a camera and an audience and an appetite for the kind of fame the puppet master himself once craved, found a human bone. For a few hours, the country stopped breathing. The Pima County medical examiner examined the find and confirmed what the desert had been hiding for centuries: prehistoric. A remain from a civilization that vanished long before January 31st existed on any calendar. Not Nancy, not Porch Guy. A ghost from a different kind of disappearance entirely. The breath the country had been holding, released into nothing. This is the 95-day reality. A desert that keeps producing answers to questions nobody asked, while the question that matters most remains unanswered. The puppet master is watching these moments. He reads the headlines. He sees the false alarms. He feels the desperation growing. He believes the desert is his last layer of protection. He has not yet met the mathematics, closing in behind it. The FBI is not waiting for a confession. They are not sitting by a tip line hoping someone in Tucson develops a conscience. They are not depending on a single breakthrough moment, the way television promised us investigations work. They are doing something far more methodical, far more patient, and far more devastating to a man who believes his God complex has made him invisible. They are building a wall, brick by brick, thread by thread. The DNA sequencing at Quantico is nearing its final stage. A genetic family tree being assembled from fragments so small, the puppet master never thought to account for them. The blockchain trail is being followed through every mixing wallet, every digital shell, every intermediary layer the boss constructed to bury his financial fingerprint, all the way to the exchange endpoint where a real name is required. And then there is the route. The escape corridor the puppet master used on the night of January 31st did not just avoid cameras by accident. It navigated specific desert corridors that mirror the exact path a local resident would take to avoid the license plate readers on Skyline Drive. That knowledge does not come from a map. It comes from memory. It comes from years of moving through those roads, the way only someone who belongs there moves through them. 3 independent threads: biological, digital, geographical, all converging on the same profile, all pointing toward the same Tucson address book. The boss is no longer a shadow. He is a statistical probability with a closing radius. and the radius is shrinking. Somewhere in Tucson tonight, the lights are on. A dinner table, a familiar neighborhood, a life that looks completely ordinary from the outside. A man who knows every shadow of the Catalina Foothills, sitting inside a world that has no idea what he carried out of it on the night of January 31st. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She had routines, a porch light she left on. Roads she had driven so many times, they had become part of her, without her noticing. A home she had filled with decades of living, the kind of living that leaves marks on walls and habits in the body, and a shape in the air that only the people who love you can feel when it is gone. That shape has been missing for 95 days. Her family has been holding the weight of that absence with bare hands since the morning of February 1st. The morning the world learned her name for the worst possible reason. They have not stopped. They have not looked away. They have asked every question that can be asked and waited through every silence that followed. The forensic net is closing. The mathematics are building. The threads are being pulled toward a name. But Nancy has not been found. And until she is, no arrest, no conviction, no headline completes this story. Justice is not a verdict. It is her coming home. Somewhere in Tucson, a man is pretending he did not destroy that possibility for a gamble he has already lost. The thread is being pulled, and when it breaks, it will happen in the dark, exactly where this started. Subscribe to Justice Over Everything and turn on notifications, because when this case breaks, you will not want to miss it. Like this video, share it, and keep Nancy Guthrie's name alive. Her family is still waiting. The investigation is still building, and we are not moving on until justice is delivered. Uncover the truth. Demand justice.